Lieutenant General Ata Hasnain, thank you so much for joining me. सर, बहुत कुछ हो रहा है मिडिल ईस्ट में और ऐसा लग रहा है कि लड़ाई अब बढ़ जाएगी और बहुत देर से सर इसका बिल्डअप हो रहा है. यूएस वाज इशूइंग वार्निंग्स कॉन्स्टेंटली. ट्रंप वाज सेइंग ईरान को अटैक करेंगे. आज अटैक हो गया है. शील्ड ऑफ जूडा हैज बीन लॉन्च्ड बाय द इजराइल एंड यूएस कंबाइंड. और इसका सर बिल्डअप बहुत इंटरेस्टिंग है, बट आपका टेक इसमें बहुत डिफरेंट है सर. हम वी वुड लव टू नो फ्रॉम you, what do you think is going on and how do we interpret it?
Thank you, Ravi Saab, for inviting me for your program. It's always a pleasure to be with you. Let me say that, yes, last 2 months, in fact, we should go even further back and go about 8 months ago when the 12-day conflict was launched between Israel, US combined against Iran. Supposedly, all the missile sites were destroyed at that time, although we do not know, have an exact damage assessment as to what was ultimately achieved, right? But despite that, the United States and Israel have both felt that Iran has still got the capability to calibrate. It's still got the missilery, a large number of missiles from North Korea, China, and Russia. It's got a huge fleet of drones with it, which it uses from time to time. It is also coercing its own population, so a regime change is necessary because this regime is not ideologically suited to the American Israel kind of interest in this region. So there are a lot of things, issues which have come up together, and the last 2 months, a coercive kind of a campaign had been launched. 19 warships had been brought into this area. A number of carriers, helicopter ships, marine ships, and things of that nature. All this was all ready, but simultaneously, a diplomatic engagement was on, and is still on. In fact, till yesterday it was on. In Vienna, Geneva, Muscat, Oman, places like that. And obviously, the Iranians were not relenting. I think, to my mind, and I have been writing and analyzing and saying that war will probably not take place. I've been proven wrong. Something has started today. I still don't call it war. I don't even call it a conflict condition. This is just a coercion which is going on. And to speed up the diplomacy, add a few screws in. This is very common in all kind of conflicts. India and Pakistan, you don't find that every day we are only launching bombs at each other. There's coercion going on. A tightening of a screw by half, by a quarter. This keeps on happening between nations. And that's exactly what has been happening all this time. This effort, calling it by various names, what I've learned, the United States is calling it Operation Epic Fury. And Israel is calling it Operation Lion's Roar. Right, and the combined name which you just gave out also, Iran is calling it Khatam ul Tufan. So there are all kinds of connotations of this which are going on at the moment. But the long and short of it is that if the intent of the United States is to bring about a regime change, then obviously it is not putting the resources on ground to achieve that. Because the regime change is not going to take place with destruction of missile sites and maritime resources or any other thing like that. There are 2-3 things which have to happen for carrying out a regime change. Number one, there has to be a large-scale destruction of infrastructure. There has to be a destruction and defeat of the IRGC, the Iranian Republican Guard Corps. Unless that happens, we've seen this happening in Gulf War 1 and Gulf War 2. If you remember, the kind of operations which have been launched today are nothing near shock and awe. We all are aware of what the doctrine of shock and awe was in 2003. It's not shock and awe, right? And there are no follow-up operations on the cards. There is no mobilization of ground troops. So obviously, this is just a standalone number of airstrikes, the kind perhaps which took place initially in Gulf War 1. And in Gulf War 1 also, if you remember, there was a very minimal rollout of the ground forces subsequently. In Gulf War 2, there was a strong rollout of the ground forces, which led to the occupation of Iraq for almost 8 years, and a well fought out insurgency, which carried on for those 11 years, created hell in the creation of the Islamic State and things like that. The United States and Israel are both mindful of all this. And therefore, they will calibrate. and sensibly calibrate. I call this a very sensible calibration which they are doing. They are projecting it as an all out, while it is not. They are projecting it as a signal, which is the right thing, signaling that there is much more in store which can happen. But it's a question of how the Iranians read it. That's the point.
Yes. Sir, to not counter it, but to just state that this is something that has never happened again. And it appears reports are coming in, they're going for the head. They're going for the jugular. They want to kill Khamenei. There are reports that the defense minister is being targeted and the president, Peshkian, is being targeted and they want them dead. And so that might render the Gulf War comparison incompatible, because in the Gulf War, they had to get Saddam Hussein, who was holed up. And so in this case, if they just kill the regime and render it headless, then...
Good. That's a good point. It is, if they are specifically... what I can make out is that a regime of this kind would have got all the facilities available to keep their leadership under protection. Now, if the United States and Israel have done good penetration, intelligence penetration, obviously they can achieve what they are intending to do. So we have to wait and see if that kind of a thing is going to happen in the near future. Then the IRGC has to be defeated or neutralized completely, which means obviously earlier a very large segment of the IRGC leadership has already been neutralized earlier. This is the next rung of it which has come up. This too can get neutralized very quickly. But the IRGC is a strong force. Can it just be neutralized only by missile strikes and this kind of a thing? I'm not so sure that can happen. This is a challenge which the Americans will have to accept and see how they want to take this forward. But if they want to achieve this, then obviously they have to think this through to a greater extent. And I'm sure they must have done it to a greater extent. This can't be allowed to remain at conflict initiation for the first 2-3 days and hope to achieve results from that.
Sir, क्या होगा अगर खुमैनी को मार दिया जाए? If he dies, if he's killed, then what happens?
You see, an attempt will obviously be made to bolster up alternatives. They do have a hierarchy within the pecking order within this. The IRGC itself, the leadership of the IRGC is strong itself. How deeply motivated it is, I cannot certify at the moment. Many times it happens that when a head falls, everything down below just goes apart. That could very well happen. And the American and Israeli intelligence would probably have ascertained this. And that is perhaps the prime reason why they are going for the jugular, for the head as such. What they're doing in terms of firing at these different Iranian military bases, about 11 or 12 of them where they have fired, is more diversionary than anything else. Iranians are also responding. Of course, the response will be not to that extent. Militarily, they are much weaker. But political statements could be made through targeting of an odd, naval vessel, for example, a helicopter ship or something like that, with the help of drones. Now, that is something which will be unacceptable to the United States and probably could spur much more military activity if a thing like that happens. I learned that already Qatar and the UAE, some areas of them have also been targeted by Iran in retaliation.
Yes, sir, it appears to be. And the 5th Naval Fleet, Bahrain में है शायद, if I'm not wrong, वहां पर भी एक मिसाइल स्ट्राइक रिपोर्ट हुई है.
So Iran is it's just taking its chances. They also know that. जी बताइए.
सर, इसके पीछे का एक थोड़ा सा मैं बैकग्राउंड और कॉन्टेक्स्ट और समझना चाहता हूँ, क्योंकि इसके पीछे एक तो ऑफ कोर्स जब पिछले जून में ऑपरेशन हैमर, whatever they call it, where they went for the nuclear facilities in Fordo in Isfahan, ऑपरेशन मिडनाइट हैमर करा इन्होंने, तो उसके बाद ईरान started to rebuild and they now want to target the ballistic missile program of Iran, because the President Trump is saying कि अगर ये बन गया इनका, तो then they can now reach the United States. Basically, ये उनका narrative है, ये उनका बहाना है.
The United States का इनका डर उस चीज का नहीं है. इनका डर ICBM इनके पास, the development of capability of ICBMs is not there. ये basically इनकी missiles जो हैं short range IRBMs kind of missiles हैं इनके पास. And what they are concerned about is these missiles can be used in salvos against American facilities in the Middle East, against Israel and all other American interests in this area. Missiles, although protection इनके पास, Israel के पास भी anti-missile shield है. Most of the United States facilities which इनके अंदर penetration हो सकता है, पहले हुआ भी है. So you will find that there will be civilian casualties, etc., in Israel and some other places in the Middle East. Then the United States will have to have the choice. Would they want to retaliate against civilian targets inside Iran? That is not the intent. Because you want the civil population on your side to make sure that the regime change takes place. The civil population is on your side. Complex kind of a situation which is developing at the moment. That is why you will find the United States and Israel will calibrate, will not use all their might, will not use all their firepower which is available with them. They'll take it up to a point, and I think they will depend a lot on intelligence.
Intelligence. Sir, आपको क्या लगता है? What is your take on the escalation ladder now? Because obviously, so far from what we know, Khamenei has not been killed. The defense minister is alive. The president is alive. And so there will be retaliation, and naturally there will be some escalation. At what point do you think it really escalates beyond control?
To my mind, it will go on another 48 hours or so if nothing much is achieved in terms of what they intend to do at this time. They will find ways of doing a ceasefire and bringing these people back to the table again and speaking. You see, this is a cat and mouse game of diplomacy with a bit of conflict conditions, back to diplomacy again. This is exactly what will happen. All the last 2 months, you've been seeing what Trump has been doing. Speaking to them at some place or the other diplomatically, then giving a threat, then bringing them back again, then giving a threat. Now what they're doing is they're calibrating militarily and will bring them back to the table again. So I don't think we should assume that there will be a natural escalation ladder which will be climbed as in due course as we go along.
There has been concern now, and I don't want to juxtapose two things which might not be correlated, but can we ignore what is happening with Afghanistan and Pakistan in this context? Is there a connection? Is there something organic here?
I know this is an interesting question, whether there is something of a connect here. In the news items which I was seeing just now, at the bottom of a particular news item, suddenly the Afghan-Pakistan situation on the Durand line also emerged all of a sudden. At the moment, I cannot put a relationship between the two immediately together because that the Americans have, of course, condemned the Taliban also, and they have supported Pakistan. They have said Pakistan has got the entire right to defend to carry out its self-defense in the light of what the Taliban has been doing, etc., etc. So obviously the Americans are expected to support Pakistan with the way the relationship with Pakistan is, and the relationship with the Taliban is, right? So I think this war is, of course, this conflict is receded to the background in the context of what has happened this afternoon, but it's not something that can be just wished away. It is a serious thing which is happening there, and it can escalate into something much more. For us in India, it is an awkward thing. Anything happening in Afghanistan, any violence happening in Afghanistan, remember, always has a cascading ripple effect across our borders. You remember in the last few weeks, the ISKP, the Islamic State for Khorasan province, has carried out an attack on a Shia shrine in Rawalpindi, Islamabad area.
Yes.
One of the assessments which is there is that the Taliban does not want to accede to the demands of Pakistan to get after the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan because they don't want to give the space to the ISKP. They feel that TTP's presence, both sides of the Durand line, is actually a neutralizing factor against the ISKP. And that is why if they target the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan, the TTP and the ISKP, which joins hands, it can be very dangerous for the Taliban. So they are not acceding to all this. And this situation will probably continue in terms of volleys of fire across the Durand line from time to time. They'll come back to the table at some stage. Again, it will happen. So this is something like it's been happening in Kashmir at most times.
Sir, I have to ask the question. You have mentioned India, and of course, we are sort of not in the center of it, but definitely an affected party in the whole thing. Whether that is the conflict with Afghanistan and Pakistan and we have that ripple effect across our borders, I don't know. One might even argue that there is an opportunity here. Pakistan is engaged. One might even argue that there is opportunity there as well because Pakistan always does seek the support of Iran and it gets it when it needs it. And now Iran is engaged as well. What is the best opportunistic optimal move for India at the moment, and why do you think, and do you think there is a connection as to why the Prime Minister of India was literally hours away in Israel, not mentioning the single at all anything about Palestine whatsoever, outright support of Israel? A few hours later, this happens. A few months ago, we were meeting with the Taliban. What is going on?
To read into your thoughts, I would love to assess and jump into assessments, but I'm not one of those. I'm very sedate in my assessments and analyses, and I wait for things to develop before I can really make up my mind on these. Otherwise, it is more, speculation than more than anything else. But having said that, uh, I don't think India, and at the moment, India has any intent of doing anything in against Pakistan at this particular moment, because the situation on the Afghanistan front is a very temporary situation, very temporary situation, and this has come many times before. These opportunities have come many times before. If at all, if people are making assessments about taking advantage of what has happened on the Western Front, the intent for India will always be POK. But then POK militarily means a couple of thousand lives, because this is an existential issue for Pakistan, and then it is also a nuclear armed state. So I could argue this till the cows come home on this issue and say no, India is not one of those which is looking for this kind of a kind of a fight between with any other nation in this manner. On this issue of the Prime Minister's visit to Israel, it's not as if it's something similar to Prime Minister Vajpayee as foreign minister visiting uh, China when the war with Vietnam and China began in 1979. It's not anything like that. To my mind, it's just coincidental that it happened. We were aware that these developments are taking place, and I still continue to believe that there will be a de-escalation in the very near future, next 48 hours, etc. This is not going to last out for a very long time. This is not going to be an existential kind of a fight between these two sides. It will be a coercive action, bringing back to diplomacy, and it could escalate again thereafter sometime.
I know, sir. One place, sir, one final question that I have is, of course, because we have limited information and context at this moment, the whole thing is still ongoing. I want to bring China into the discussion, if I can, if I may.
Yeah, please.
How do you think they are looking at the whole thing?
The Chinese have been very quiet about the Middle East. In my assessment earlier, also, China jumped into the Iran Saudi Arabia standoff at one stage about 3 years ago. If you remember, they brought the two sides to the table and had an agreement between them, etc. It felt it was a win-win situation if both the Saudis and the Iranians were both selling oil to China, which they are selling anyway. But to have large mega deals, the kind of deal that they had with the Iran, almost $400 billion worth of deal and things of that nature. But the Chinese don't understand the Middle East. They, surprisingly, I mean, with all their academic capability, the strategic analytical capability, the NDU, which is a brilliant institution by itself, somehow they misread this whole situation, thinking that peace between Iran and Saudi Arabia could be bought off on business terms by just coming to the negotiating table, not realizing there's a civilizational divide which is there, an ideological divide which is there, which has to be understood very deeply. It's a raging war, ideological war within Islam itself that has to be understood. I don't think the Chinese really understood it. So that this gives me the idea the Chinese are hesitant usually to do anything in the Middle East. They just like to keep an observation. For them, it is an area of great interest because, after all, the energy flows which are coming from here, All the sea lanes are from here only, which go through the Indian Ocean and the Straits of Malacca. That is how their economy has been powered all these years. For them, that is the major interest. They don't want the Straits of Hormuz to be closed. They don't want any obstacles coming in the way of the flow of energy from here. That is their major concern, and I'm sure as things go along, they will play to their interest by attempting to intercede, attempting to speak on this, and telling people to cool down generally, because conflict is in this area is completely against their interests.
Sir, I want to just throw in a small data point about it, and I want to correlate that with what we said about India not being that opportunistic, but I wish to argue that China might be. And the data point I want to throw in here is that after the operation that they had conducted to destroy Iran's nuclear programs, Iran started to rebuild. And once they started to rebuild, I have data here that shows that in November 2025, the US intercepted a shipment of planetary mixers, which is needed for solid rocket fuel from China in the Indian Ocean. So they might be opportunistic, not in terms of only diplomacy, but in terms of logistics, in terms of supplying weapons.
There's
in fact,
no doubt about that. Ravi Saab, let me tell you, I have no doubts about it. The missiles that the United States and Israel is talking about are. I have been tracing the advent of missiles into Iran from 1992, and I remember mostly it was North Korean missiles at that time. A large shipment of North Korean missiles started coming into Iran from 1992 onwards, and then the Chinese missiles, and then Russian missiles. Today, the plethora of them are Chinese missiles, which are there. So, and of course, then there's a capability of self-manufacture with the assistance of the Chinese. So, the Chinese interest in terms of his weapons industry, arms industry is there, no doubt, and his relationship with Iran today is a very, very strong relationship. If you're looking at the North-South divide virtually, you're looking at Russia, China with North Korea, and Iran very much as a part of that club which we are looking at.
Understood. So the situation still is very fluid, and I wish to keep on speaking with you as this develops further to gain more understanding and to gain more context. Nothing brings context and knowledge and understanding rather than having things being played out in front of you, and then somebody like you commenting on it and then educating us about it, for which I am forever grateful, always thankful. And it's such a pleasure always speaking with you.
Thank
and you
so
bring
much.
The perspective. You said that your perspective is sedate. I love that you said that. And
I've been known for that mostly. Most of my assessments are very sedate because I've never been a warmonger myself. I've always said armies are meant for peace. Armies are meant to create peace. That's what they are.
But that's what we need to hear perhaps sir, now in this situation.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
Thank
sir.
you so much, Ravi Saab. Thank you. All the best.
Thank you.